Okay, got it. All right. So we our speaker tonight is Robert Delwood. He's a programmer, writer, and programmer writer in Chicago's legal community and formerly with the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston. He's been writing API documentation since the early days of Microsoft Windows. He sees the exponential growth of the REST API economy. He invites everyone to become an API documentation writer and is willing to help get them there. And I'm going to let him tell you about what this program consists of. I'm just going to turn it over to him, and here we go.
Oh, thanks. So I thank everyone for inviting me. Back in November, I got a letter from Nikki asking me to present here. So I thank you for that. So everything he just said about me is true. I am an API documentation writer, been doing it for a long time, absolutely love what I do. So my background was as a developer, and at one point a buddy of mine who was working at Microsoft at the time calls me up, tells me about this new title that Microsoft is trying to develop, where they need developers who know grammar. And literally 3 months from that phone call, I had moved up to Microsoft doing it and never looked back. Now I have been a developer at stretches during the time, but I was never away from API documentation writing. So these are my notes. Let me share my screen. So, oh shoot, how is this? Okay, so starting off, and don't worry, I'll explain this more in more detail. But just to give you a quick overview, this is in OpenAPI file, and OpenAPI is now probably the closest thing to a standard in the API documentation world there is. It was developed over the last 7 years. It's a proven technology, and it is the standard technology that I believe everyone will be expected to use in the next few years. It's structured. It's detailed. It is an interesting solution to this problem. So again, a little bit about myself. I call myself programmer writer and programmer writer. Programmer because I have been a developer, writer because I've been a journalist. I graduated with a journalism degree, practiced in journalism. But it was Microsoft that came up with the title programmer writer, and that's the one that I like the most, because it tells exactly what this role does. It combines programming with writers, and we write to programmers. On my LinkedIn website, I truncate it and simply say I'm a programmer who writes about programming to other programmers, and it's and hopefully that explains a lot in a few words. Other things I do is I have been doing office automation for a long time. I get to program Microsoft Office, Word, and PowerPoint to do exactly what the people need it to do. And I'm also a tools writer. Because I'm a developer, I also have the habit of writing tools that I need myself in order to get my job done. And a lot of the times, if I need this tool, then others will like using it too. I have been lucky enough to work at some great companies. I started off at Microsoft. I was at NASA for for 15 years, and I'm currently at Walmart. So who is this presentation for? This is not for experienced API documentation writers. It's for the people who are interested in documentation writing, what it's about, or the technologies that API documentation writers use. So a few disclaimers. This is largely on my personal experience. So in no way am I saying this is the only way of doing things. Every company is different. Every market is different. Almost every API is different. Your mileage may vary, but I believe these are very common or very typical, or it's a best practice in getting something done. And I'm going to do this in three parts. I'm going to explain what an OpenAPI file is to begin with, what how to edit a file, and how to display in OpenAPI file. So this is not, in talking to everyone before this meeting, I caught on that there might have been some confusion. This is not about writing the content of an API file. That is a whole separate profession. It can't be covered in 20 minutes. This is about introducing the OpenAPI file to people who are not familiar with it. There's a lot of confusion out there. If you Google OpenAPI, what struck me the most is there's a lot of people out there that try to make it sound complicated, and I don't like that in our industry. We should be striving for simplicity. So I want to explain this in as simple and straightforward and actionable terms as I can. And by actionable, I mean this is something that hopefully after the meeting, you can go out and actually do with some online tools, with some online documentation. There should be nothing complicated about this. Also, I want to take a pause here too. In the chat, I sent out some links to my material. So I sent out a link to my website. I do a lot of articles. I publish a lot of articles on Medium. Feel free to look at them, review them, agree, disagree. I don't really care, but read them and understand what I'm saying, and then you can use it.
Robert,
yes.
When you put things in the chat, they're only there for the people who were there when you put them there. People who join later can't see them. So if you add them again at the end, that would be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll put it. Yeah, I'll publish it. They're not exclusively API oriented. I wanted to prove to myself that I could still write non-technical articles. So there's some of those thrown in, including some original research on who killed Mozart. That was sort of fun to write about. So the first question is, what is OpenAPI and what is an OpenAPI file? So commonly in the industry, it's known to be either OpenAPI or Swagger. I don't know why Swagger, the word Swagger is so popular. OpenAPI is not Swagger. It has a it has a common background. Yes, Swagger came out with this concept about 2015 and 2016, but they spun it off they separated themselves from OpenAPI, and now I think 90% of the market is probably OpenAPI. There has been some separation, divergence along along the way. So the two are not the same. And yet everyone only knows this as Swagger. Even people who don't know what we do will call it Swagger. And that's misleading. It's not, it's a pet peeve of mine if you can't if you can't tell. So it's OpenAPI. An OpenAPI file is simply the OpenAPI structure written down. So a couple key things here, and these are all important too. OpenAPI is plain text. You can use any editor. You can use any process that handles plain text. There's nothing formatty about it. It's tag oriented, which means the items will occur only after a specific tag. They're on the screen. You see the summary tag, operation ID, parameters. They are a specification. You just can't make up your own you can't just make up your own tags. You have to follow existing ones. It's structured. It's literally structured. And over the years, structured in development has sort of taken on different meanings. But if you can see on the screen, there are distinct levels of indentations. In fact, in here, it's two spaces from the previous item. If you do not structure it correctly, you will get an error. This helps, not being a bad thing. This actually helps in structuring and following the language. You can see visually where all these things are going. It's tag specification. I covered that, and it is YAML. So YAML actually means YAML ain't markup, and yes, it's a circular reference. But YAML is spec designed a few years ago to make writing configuration files easier. If anyone has written configuration files under DOS or Windows, it gets very confusing. So someone came along, created YAML. It's both human readable. We can look at it, figure out what's going on, and it's machine readable because it's so structured. YAML itself is OpenAPI is a specification wholly within YAML. So OpenAPI does conform to YAML standards. You can see these standards at these pages. Again, I'll have those up at the end. So the whole trick in OpenAPI is, oops, what is that? Oh, sorry. So there's actually two more important things. So although the structure is YAML and OpenAPI files support Markdown and HTML. Now everyone should know what HTML is. Markdown is a relatively new language. It is a lightweight markup language designed to take HTML on, and I'll have examples of that later. Also, OpenAPI itself is not an authoring environment. It's just a plain file and plain text file, and you have to use your own tools to write in it and compile it, as it were. But writing to these files is not difficult at all. Being a plain text editor, you can use Notepad, Notepad++. If none of you have, if any of you have not seen Notepad++, I highly recommend it as your standard plain text editor. But there are some specialized editors out there. IntelliJ and Eclipse are, while they are development environments, they do support editing what writers need from editing very well. Most of these are free anyway. So if you had hired on full-time at a company and you work with developers, again, there's probably an 80 or 90% chance you'll either use IntelliJ or Eclipse anyway. You just use your aspects, the aspects of it that a writer needs to use, and ignore the rest. Other tools include Microsoft's venerable Visual Studio. Stoplight is a relatively new product, about 5 years old, but it's designed specifically for OpenAPI file editing. It's a very good editor. And of course, Smart Bear, who owns Swagger, has their own tools. So this is what editing looks like in a plain text editor. Somebody, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. And somebody wrote he thought YAML stood for yet another markup language. That's the other interpretation. As far as names go, I don't know how names evolve or myths get created, but I've heard both refer to YAML. Fortunately, it doesn't make any difference at all. So this is editing. This is what editing looks like in a plain text editor. The whole concept of the tags are very JSON-like. JSON follows a very similar pattern in that you have the tag. Let's pick summary, colon, and then a value. So everything is going to follow in OpenAPI. Everything is going to follow that format: tag name, and value. Now this can get complicated because the value itself can be a composite structure like an array or array of objects. It can get complicated, but ultimately it comes down to two things always being paired off. This is what editing and editing with Swagger's online editor. I will show this to you in a moment. They do Smart Bear does have a free online editor, and it's convenient because you have the code in the left hand and the left column, and the results on the right side. It's dynamic, so when you make a change, you can see it immediately showing up there. And then if you go to a development environment, there's going to be some extra things on the screen, but like I said, you ignore what you don't need. But it's the same concept. There's a main screen that has your code and your tags, and you do all of your editing in that. But you'll also have other things. You'll have the option to display the file structure. Both Eclipse and IntelliJ has a terminal window built in. Chances are you'll be using get, for instance, to manage all of this anyway. So what does editing this mean then? We're editing files, but what does it mean? So it's plain text. Which means there's only text. There's no markup per se. I said it supports HTML and the markup and the markdown language, but it's not like DITA or the old style Word before 2003, I think, which was highly formatted. There's none of that. What you see on the screen is really what's there. Markdown is a lightweight markup. I'll get to that, and HTML is HTML. So in editing in making actual changes, you can do it in several ways. Like I said, plain text works fine. If you notice, there's except for the last line, there's nothing formatty about this. You don't have to use Markdown. You don't have to use HTML. That provides a few features like formatting. But if you're good with just pure content, you use an editor and just type what you see. Going to Markdown now. So Markdown is a lightweight markup language. But there is some in interpretation. So you will need a Markdown editor for this. Now there's plenty of them out there, and a lot of the editing tools and a lot of the rendering tools, it will interpret Markdown for you. But for instance, in Markdown, in Markdown, a single pound sign is the first level header. So it translates to that. One asterisk is italic. 2 asterisks down here is bold. For instance, it does lists automatically. If you use an asterisk or a or hyphen, it knows to interpret that. And they do have a basic linking mechanism. So at the bottom, you have a link with the title and the link target. Excuse me. So for this, let's go to Swagger. So here's the online Swagger editor, and it really is as simple as what you type. Let's go to update an existing pat. Okay, so it's dynamic and enter your text, and it shows up. It shows up immediately. This is a very convenient way of writing. You can that immediate feedback is handy. A lot of people prefer editing in the Swagger editor, and then we'll talk about rendering. What do you do with this file for the end product? But I'll show later. Each tag has a very specific purpose. The summary tag, for instance, is what appears if you have a TOC, table of contents, or in Swagger's case, this first line explaining the call. The summary is that, and hopefully in a minute. Yeah, sorry, that was a mistake. And so the summary pulls up description file. I will talk about in a minute, but it's exactly what it sounds like. It is the description of whatever you're writing. Every item will have a description, from the calls down to the individual parameters. The editor is nice too, because it will show you your errors immediately. A minute ago, I said this is a structured file, so everything has to line up exactly. I misaligned on it, now in this case intentionally, summary, and there it now knows something is wrong, bad in indentation. So you can track it back to there, and it goes wide. It's a robust editor. It knows a lot of the errors. It is hard to. It's easy to make errors. It's hard to not find them and fix them, because they're pointed out immediately. So editing a Swagger file isn't that
A question? Yeah, if you're using a editor that doesn't show what your changes immediately, you write your file and then you display it, and then you see an error, and you have to go back and change it in the editor and go back and forth that way.
Yeah. Exactly. That's why I would highly recommend you using a dynamic editor like Swagger or IntelliJ. If you use a plain text editor, it's not going to be smart enough to know about OpenAPI errors. So the only way you'll find out about them is essentially when you compile it. It'll tell you. Unfortunately, at that point, it's not going to be very specific about what the error is, and you're going to have to guess a little bit. No errors will ever get past you in any case. It's just tracking them down is the problem. Would be the problem. This editor will spot probably 75% of the common errors that you'll encounter. Now, keep in mind that YAML and OpenAPI is a professional enterprise tool that's designed for incredibly fine nuanced results. Developers can use it at the enterprise level, and they can make it do what it does. So there is that built in. However, writers probably won't get to that complexity, and I'll talk about that in a next. So hopefully I point out that the actual editing of the file is relatively easy. I found this easier than using DITA for instance. The problem is that there are a lot of tags. These are only some of them that have actually appeared in this presentation at some point. So the question is, of all these tags, why is it not confusing for writers to edit them? And this is where a lot of the confusion comes from, if not outright intimidation. A lot of new writers will see these complicated. That's not it. We'll see these complicated files, because we as writers don't touch many of these tags. In fact, we only ever modify probably at most 4, and 99% of the time it's only one tag. It's the description tag, and that is that's the whole secret in working out OpenAPI files. Because keep in mind, the developers OpenAPI is sort of the interesting concept in the writing world. Is the only file I know that both developers and writers will be modifying not only at the same time, but a lot of developers and a lot of writers can be modifying the exact same file also at the same time. And it's precisely because the tags are so clearly defined that everyone gets along. So we deal with the description. Best practice is no developer has any purpose whatsoever modifying any text within a description tag. That is uniquely ours. Conversely, we have no purpose touching anything other than the description files. For instance, we cannot change. For example, here is where developer defines a parameter for their call, line 16 through 23. We cannot change the name of the parameter. They set that. We cannot change where this parameter appears, either in the endpoint or as a query parameter. We cannot change if it's required or not. We cannot change that it's an integer. If they say it's an integer, has to be in integer. We cannot touch that. We can only touch the description file. And so delineated are these tags that this should be a model for world peace. Developers and writers alike can modify the exact same file at the exact same time and have no conflicts whatsoever. Now, a minute ago, I said that many developers and many writers can modify the same file at the same time because everyone is working on their separate piece of the file. So some developers will be working on first call, some developers will be working on the second, third, fourth, and so on. And likewise, the writers are working in their own section of the file. So there should be no conflicts among writers and developers in this process. And I'll go one step further in a moment. So we are limited to really 4 or 5 tags. And even then, description is like I said, used 99% of the time. We might change the example if we think there's a better or more clear or more simple example. Operation ID is just internal, and the summary is the TOC, which we should also be modifying. But you really only modify the TOC on infrequent occasions.
So Robert, are you saying that people work in this without using source code control?
I'm getting to that. So yeah, give me a moment here. So the construct of an OpenAPI file now should be less intimidating. Less intimidating, even more so, in that the writers will never actually create an OpenAPI file. In fact, writers will probably only ever modify an existing file and will only ever modify the description. For example, if a developer adds a whole new call, whole new request, it's their responsibility to make sure all the tags are set up. It can be no other way. They will know the call name, they will know the parameters, they will know the characteristics of the parameters, whether it's a string or an integer or long. So we're not going to be actually modifying. We're not going to be adding anything to it. We're not going to be deleting anything to it. We're just writing our docs. And as I point out before, everything has a nice correspondence. So you can see how each item lines up to what it looks like in the UI. And again, you'll only be modifying few of these. It's well structured. This is a well considered file system. They put a lot of work in it, and there's a handsome payoff for it. So there's two more things about what goes on here. So if you notice, an OpenAPI file is not like HTML, which describes what the item is supposed to look like. There is the concept of the markdown, and yes, you can use HTML to bold stuff. But otherwise, in just looking at this, there's nothing about display, and displaying it requires a separate rendering engine. Now it's convenient because I've been using the Swagger online editor, which does actually do stuff to the code. It pulls it out. It applies for formatting. There's some formatting that we didn't tell it about. For example, this is the body, the body section. This is something that that Swagger does for you automatically. You don't have to worry about what the body label looks like. Swagger does that for you. But there's another common tool out there, and this is my personal preference. It's an application called Redoc or Redocly. Its original form was also Rebilly, but this is a great render. In my opinion, this is a great rendering engine for the for these tools. There is an installation aspect to it. You have to install the tool, but then again, you don't have to install it. The developers will do that for you, because installation's not all that not all that user friendly. But once it's installed, it is a command line. It's a command line option. It's like Redocly. I don't remember it offhand if it's all scripted. It's like Redocly YAML name. It goes off, compiles it, and then it displays it to the screen. But this is very professional. It's a very easy system. There is a free version to Redocly. There's also professional and enterprise. I would say probably 75% of all enterprises out there use a form of Redocly. So you'll actually see this format if you look around at other people's online API docs. It's highly configurable. So even though the font changed and there may be lines around boxes, you'll recognize the 3 columns, the drop down list. So back to a previous question. When you're done editing, or I recommend compiling it very often. Make 2 or 3 changes, compile just to see what it looks like on the screen. See if there aren't any mistakes that you haven't overlooked. But it really is ridiculously simple once it's set up. It's set up for you. Unfortunately, none of these tools had writers in mind when they designed them. But fortunately, once it's set up by a dev team, it is simple to use. Now, and somebody asked us a minute ago. So up until now, it looks like that I'm using an API file on my local machine, and it has a Wild West approach to editing. I gave the impression that you're going to have dozens of developers and dozens of writers in the same file. And that's true. There may be dozens of writers and developers in the same file, but chances are you're going to be using a source control for this. And right now, the reigning champion is Git. And that is a very, very fine tool. Again, it's very developer oriented, so getting used to it is going to be going to be tricky, but it does a couple things for you. One, you check it out on your local machine, you make copies, you make the edits that you need to do on your local machine. Then when you send it back in, there's a mandatory review. A lot of companies will require 2 people to review your changes before it gets merged back into the main branch. It also looks for conflicts before you merge it in. So if by chance you modified the exact same line that someone else just modified on the and checked in on the main branch, you will get a warning that there's a conflict, and you will be given the choice how you want to handle it, whether ignore yours and go with theirs, go with yours instead of using theirs, or re-editing it and resubmitting it. So it's this 2-level separation of editing that makes everyone get along so perfectly. In a large company, they will be modifying the same OpenAPI file that you have, but they'll be separated by branches, and they'll be separated by time. Really, there is, for as complicated and uncontrolled as it sounds, my experience is there has been so few conflicts along the way. It's absolutely remarkable. Now, instead of using get, which is the command line version of it, there are other applications. There is Bitbucket and Source. These are applications. They do have a better graphical user interface, but ultimately they are still running get commands in the background. 1 second. Okay.
So I have another question.
Yes.
So this is purely reference documentation, and the question is, how do you integrate it with conceptual documentation, a programmer's guide, things like that?
It's good. It's good. Question. This is not purely referential stuff. I have shown referential stuff. This is a good question, and let's see if I don't already have that answered somewhere. I don't have an example of it. However, in the same tags, so I've been using tags to show calls and code and endpoint requests. You can still use the same tags. You can still use a description tag for anything you want. So, for instance, let's go back to the Swagger editor. So I could. Okay. So here's a good example. So the description tag a minute ago I said is all yours. This is purely the writer's world, and you can make it. If you notice, some of the descriptions are 1 line. Some of them have this pipe mark. When you add a pipe mark, it means anything that's indented under description is yours. In other words, you can make this as long as you want. And let's see. Yeah.
Where does this fit in the hierarchy?
Now, Swagger is not a good example of hierarchy, because they have a vertical layout. Everything is on one page and it goes up or down. Readocly has, where is Readocly now? Readocly has 3 columns to it. One of which is the TOC. So if you go into the index file, the main starting point of all this, you can go in and then put your own your own sections in there. You can have as many chapters as you want. The free version limits you to only one level. So under pet, I can only have things in this extreme left column. In the paid version, I think you can have 5 levels of indentation. Each one can be its own drop down. So it's very common. I didn't show it here, unfortunately, but it's very common to have that introduction. In fact, it's sort of mandatory to have those introductions. But it is just, in writing them, it's just a variation on a theme. You would simply
So the Open API standard has a place where you can put conceptual information. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, exactly. So if I wanted, if I was using this with Swagger, for instance, I would need a level. I would need 2 more tags for it to indent properly. But the concept is this: once you get to the description, you can have in anything you want, and you can have as much as you want. In addition, you can also take all these files and outsource them with another tag, the file ref. So I could do something like this, and when it compiles, it would then pull in everything that is in this YAML file. But it could also be a markdown file too. I mean, you don't want your OpenAPI files to be 15,000 lines long. You want to import as many files as you can to make this main file easy to read. But
so they're like includes of some sort.
I'm sorry?
They're like an include file.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So it's quite versatile in that regard.
Did you say you could include the ref both markdown files and YAML files now, or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So markdown files are just pure markdown, but that's good if you're including a lot of if it's basically just text, and it can do images too. But there wouldn't be any you wouldn't need tags in a pure markdown file. So I hope, again, I didn't go into the content writing of OpenAPI. I wanted to introduce the OpenAPI file because I think there is enough confusion out there, and I think a lot of people make it sound complicated. You know, there's 10,000 line files, and you have to find. No, you're only going. I can even simplify it even more. You're not going to be adding any tags yourself, and you're only going to be modifying descriptions. The description tag. So hopefully I've taken it from this vague, intimidating concept of OpenAPI down to all you have to do is modify one tag. It really is that simple.
How do you link to say you've used this OpenAPI file to define a whole bunch of endpoints, and in your text, in your markdown file, you want to refer to one of those. You want to point to one of those. Is that how do you label them somehow to
Oh,
target?
Unfortunately, linking is a weak point in OpenAPI. They have the concept. Yes, you can link between yeah, you can link between different pages, but there's still enough bugs in it that I don't link yet. It's not worth the risk. Now on one page like this, you can link, and it's been so long I would have to look up what that command is. But linking within a file is possible, but I really wish they would improve it. Now you have hyperlinks. You can hyperlink out to anywhere on the on the web, and to files also somewhere on the web. But that's not quite what you asked.
Okay.
So I have a more sort of basic level question. Could you, I don't think we all get it, and I've always been a bit of an autodidact on these things. Could you run us through, because right now what we're talking about, some of us grew up doing APIs in other contexts.
Yeah.
Right now, when we say OpenAPI, now we're talking specifically for these HTTP, HTTPS, or RESTful, or that kind of API. So could you quickly maybe run down the completely dumb level 101 how an API works? And I know
Blah. That's a pretty broad question.
yeah. The reason I ask is
I'll pass if you don't mind. I'll pass on that
okay.
right.
Because for tech writers, sometimes like one of these two questions about because I had these myself about how does this the hierarchy, what is it doing? Or maybe you can just run us through how an OpenAPI file is used. As in what happens, if I correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's this bunch of APIs that say Cisco or someone who has a software that they want to make available to their clients or partners so they can, like PayPal, for example, classically.
Right.
Wants to add payment to their website. These guys expose, as they say, an API to this customer, say Nike or someone, so that they can integrate in a payment API or a payment
Right.
on their website. So what happens, correct me again if I'm wrong, the API is being developed in-house, right? At PayPal or wherever.
Right.
And basically what they deliver to Nike or their partner is a bunch, okay, here's our website, and then they give them this either usually or almost always on a website where what the partner sees is this pages and pages of API calls, right? So they have a page with a list of all the names, and then they can click on it, and then what the customer sees is that I think that middle column from redocketing. Right?
Yeah, well, they need to see both.
Right.
So if I understand your question, let's go back to the okay. So the whole reason that API documentation exists is for client developers.
Right.
So I own a company. I think I have a really cool product. I want people to use it. So I will come up with an API. I will come up with the documentation, and I will give client developers outside of the company the documentation. And if they follow the documentation, like I said, they can write their endpoints, and the endpoints include both the address and the accompanying needed information. They can write their endpoints so that they'll hit your servers. They're well formatted, so your servers understand what's going on, and they will send information back to the people. So For instance, I'm a bank. I come up with an API. I publish it on my site. Someone comes along, wants to write an application of their own. They are a 14-year-old person who's doing lawn mowing work for the summer, but he can write his own mobile app. So he writes his own mobile app, but he wants to make automatic deposits to this bank. He will go to that API, figure out what the calls are, incorporates that into his own tool, so that when he pushes OK, that endpoint is sent to the bank.
Right.
So that's the whole point. So one of my sayings is, you're paid by the company, but you work for the clients.
Mhm.
Because all of this has to be so clear to a person who doesn't know what your developers know, that they can still write these functions and have them work.
Right.
Did that answer your question?
Right. So I was just trying to clear. So what they deliver to the client developer, like the bank or whatever, delivers is basically a set of online reference documentation, as someone said, which is this, right?
Right.
Which basically is a bunch of pages that look like what we see on the screen right now. And then the programmer at the lawn mowing company knows how to create pages with these forms where they can fill out a form, and then this payload is created and sent back to that.
There is yes, exactly. The target has to understand what's going on. A ridiculously simple case is
YouTube.
YouTube. This is an API. Someone told me that if I type YouTube in, it goes out to their server and send stuff back. This is as simple of an API as you can get.
Right. And then if you, my favorite for YouTube is if you give it a question mark and then T is equal to 40, it'll start that video at a certain point.
Right. Or anything like that. But again, they have to go back to your documentation and figure out what those values are. So so for instance, pet, you know, if someone wants to make a pet call from Swagger's example, there's five parameters, at least five, because category is a drop down. There's at least 5 parameters that they may or may not have to include. They have to know which ones are required. So the name and some sort of URL is required. We have to tell them what it is, but we also have to tell them what the ID is. Why would you ever want to use the ID parameter? Where does it come from? What does it mean? It all comes from the document at some point.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But OpenAPI makes this a reasonable chance for writers now, because we can go to the OpenAPI file, we can find the ID parameter, and there's a description, and we can just go at it.
Got it.
So I think I'm running at near out of time. Were there any other questions I overlooked?
No, don't forget those links you were going to put in the chat.
Oh yes. I'm going to stop sharing here for a moment.
I think there are tools you can use to interact with an API. Like the most basic one is called curl in in Unix or Linux. But there are other much more powerful ones where you can set up ways of interacting with APIs.
Yeah, and yeah, there's a whole in industry. The curl is a command line is a command line way of sending a in endpoint. It's convenient, but I use an application called Postman, and that is
Postman, did you say? Yeah.
Postman.
Yeah.
So there's a lot I didn't talk about here either, just for time reasons. There's an industry. There are dozens, 24. There are some, not an extensive amount, of third-party tools that once you have a well-formed and properly formatted OpenAPI file, you can do a lot with it. You can convert it to JSON. You could send it to, if you were right, you could write your own rendering engine. The whole trick, though, is everything depends on the OpenAPI file. Swagger, a lot of people like Swagger and don't like Redocly. That's fine, but ultimately it comes down to both use an OpenAPI file. No, there is no getting around that fact. I'm trying to refine my
Nikki, you're on mute again.
Yes, I have a question.
yes,
Okay,
Nick.
it almost sounds like I have never written any API documentation in my life, but it sounds like someone like me could go in and once they say the mark, whoever designs the API says what this is for. In other words, all I need is to find out this API here that I'm documenting, that I'm writing the description for, is a solution. What problem are we trying to solve? And I put that in the description. And that's all I really have to know is what are you trying, what does this function or this thing do? And the audience I'm aiming at is the programmer who's going to be using this API. They need a well-written description that explains in their perspective what's going on. Did I get that right?
You got the concept right. If I can contradict you, that is a dangerously simplified approach to it. What I didn't mention in this is there is a developer aspect to it. At the very beginning, I made a clear point. I was a developer, and my title is programmer writer. Because you have to connect with your audience. I can almost, in tech writing in general, whenever you read something that you know a little bit about, real often you'll read something that just doesn't sound like it's being spoken by someone who knows that topic. You use the words a little bit wrong, and no one would use that expression quite that way. And that is even more so in API. They will smell blood. So if they get a whiff that what they're reading is not by another developer, they're going to mistrust you. Now, I do not want to discourage anyone from going into this. What you said is basically true. And another one of my sayings is, if you know the theory, the rest are just details, and you can almost always figure out the details if you know where you're going. So you're right in that regard. It's the language, the jargon, and the I don't know, the Dasein, the spirit of the of what you're writing that matters. So I don't want people to think that you have to be a developer or you have to know language in going in. You don't. What you do have to do is treat it like a craft, learn a little bit each day, and go back to the previous day's work and make those corrections.
Mm.
And I say that because that will concrete those concepts in your mind.
Mhm.
Anyone can read, about how to do brain surgery or build a house by reading a book. I'm a sucker for This Old House. I
Mhm.
haven't done it. I don't know. I don't know how to build a house. I've never hammered my own frame. And the minute you start hammering your own frame, you can go back the day before and now make corrections to what you do. So I encourage anyone to go into API reading. I don't know if you're here before the meeting, but there is a severe shortage of API documentation writers.
Mm.
And honestly, the only place they're going to come from is from the tech writing.
Mm.
But if you don't know programming, I'm sorry, you're going to have to learn programming along the way.
Mm.
So you have to connect with the developers, and you have to use their terms literally on their terms.
Of course, programming to an HTTP based API is fairly simple.
But you're not explaining HTTP to the audience.
No,
You're explaining how to use this call.
right.
Mm.
And depending on the industry, if it's banking industry, there's going to be banking terms in there, banking concepts.
Mm.
Science, there's going to be scientific concepts. But the bottom line is there always will be, your audience will always be programmers. And you have to explain how what you're explaining fits into what they're doing.
Mm.
So
Okay.
you may never actually see the internal developers, the company developers code. In fact, a lot of times it's pretty boring. It just hits a database, and if you ask for a list of employees, if the API gets a list of employees, all it does, all the underlying code's going to do is hit a database in 2 or 3 queries and sends those. It's pretty boring to look at.
Mm.
But explain what's going on to the developers, and that can get into some technical prowess. So your concept was not wrong. It was just, dangerously simplified.
Right, because your goal coming in here was to simplify this and make it uncomplicated, less complicated, because there's a lot of talk out there that makes it sound really, really complicated. But what really boils down is all you have to do is write the description. But writing the description is itself, requires knowledge of to write a description that's comprehensible, you have to know the target audience. Okay, thank you.
Right. So
I think Nikki is right in a way that it's important to understand what people are going to do with this API, and
Right.
and to understand what the sort of mental model that this API creates that you're going to interact with, and explaining that is important. It's something beyond just describing each endpoint and whether you post or get or whatever, and how you describe the parameters and how you format them.
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. And that sort of segues into the question, why can't you use Java docs for this? Java docs is very good at going in, looking at the code. It actually looks at the code. It knows what the call signature is. It knows what the parameters are. The developers will explain a little bit about the parameters, but they won't go into details. So it'll spit out a nice looking API doc, but there will be a conspicuous lack of details.
Mm.
With Java docs, of course, you can put in module pages and things like that provide that kind of conceptual stuff at a higher level than.
Right. And there's other tools. Visual Studio has, you know, has their own documentation package too. So they're around, but there's a reason you don't hear about them a whole lot. There's a reason you don't hear anyone other than scientists using Java docs, because it's just not that good. I hope I didn't offend just everyone with that. Because my experience with Java docs is from NASA. You had all these engineers who think they could write their own code, and they produce their own documentation, but they're not programmers. They're thermal scientists. They're orbital mechanics experts who know a little bit of Java. Not quite the same.
Well, if your program isn't structured very well, then your Java docs aren't going to fix it.
Right.
Yeah,
Now that's not a complaint either. If that's all they have, it's good, and it's good that they can get what they want done. But you can't call it a professionally done product.
All right. Well, are we ready to stop the recording here? Have we asked all the questions we want to ask and so forth?
Yep.
I guess we have.
Yeah.